I never slept in that back room again.
The family, understandably, packed all of their stuff the next morning.
4 times in a row.
Today I've got some stories about things that should not exist. They're full of dark encounters and events that cannot be explained. And you'll see what happens when reality starts to fall apart.
Y'all want to hear about this time where me and my friends went to Miami and we went to this nightclub and there was a spirit in that nightclub and the spirit actually helped me save my friend from possibly being sexually assaulted in the bathroom? Come on. Okay, so me and my friends, we get to Miami. Fast forward, we find this really, really small club. This was the smallest club I ever been to. We went there for my friend Naya's birthday, and we used, us and the girl we used to be friends with, right? And so when we find this club, we get there. It's in a predominantly Latino and Hispanic area. So we're standing in line, and I get this feeling that somebody is staring at me. And I look over, and there's this man walking, like he's just walking towards us. And while he's walking towards us, it's like he was staring me down. All right. When I say staring me down, I mean, I was like, you cool? I ain't trying to start no beef in Miami. You feel me? So fast forward, the man that was staring me down ends up like pretty much bypassing the line and walks right past the security guard. Just walks right in the club. And so I didn't pay it any mind. We finally get let in. And when we get let in, instantly, there's some men buying us drinks. Get some drinks and whatever. But of course, because I'm come from the kind of family I come from, I don't trust nobody, and I'm from Detroit. So, I really don't trust that. So I go over to, the bar, and I'm watching them pour our drinks. So get our drinks, go back to this little sitting area, and we sit down. But my friend, she is torn up. When I say, you would think that she had about 3 or 4 or 5 of them things, like she's messed up real bad. And so I'm keeping an eye on her. Mind you, I have to be the sober friend. I'm older than them by like 2-3 years. And then I turn around and I was talking to these girls. It was a group of girls from LA that we were like kicking it with. And so we're talking to them and ended up turning around and my friend was gone. And I was like I started panicking looking for her. Now, the man that was staring me down, that walked that bypassed the security guard and stuff like that, I see him and I can hear his voice, but I don't see his lips moving. It's so loud in there. It's a miracle I could even hear it, but I hear him. And he said, go to the bathroom. I see my friend, this dude, and she looked like she just having a hard time. And he pretty much holding her up, pretty much. Y'all, I got real active because who did you think you was playing with like this? So I rush over there and I grab my friend. And when I grab my friend, the dude, he get real mad. She said she wanted me to show her. If you don't back the fuck, don't play with me. Do not play with me. So now I'm not feeling safe. You know what I'm saying? Now I'm trying to leave. And so I tell my friend there, she torn up too. I go back over to her. The girls from LA had her. They was making sure she was okay. And so I go back over there and tell her okay, I'm ready to go now. And so, my friend, the other friend that we're not friends with no more, she's still trying to dance and she moving about. And so I'm standing right there with her. I'm pretty much her security guard right about now. And so I'm standing there with her. She dancing, all crazy and whatnot. And so the dude that was trying to take her to the bathroom ended up coming over to me with another dude. They're pretty big dudes. You know what I'm saying? And so there's this guy, he had this accent, like a Jamaican accent. He's over at the bar and the spirit pretty much led me to go and stand next to this man. So I took my friend to go stand next to him. He's not a large guy like these other dudes. Okay. He's a, pretty nice sized guy, but he's not big like them. But I go and stand next to them. When I tell you that it took one look for that man to get them 2 men, and they got on. And he it's almost like he was all right, nah, just gave him this look. But after that, I felt okay. In my spirit, I felt like it was settled. You know what I'm saying? But then after we ended up leaving from there, I made my friend come on. The guy, he said, y'all need some water. So he get us some water. I give it to my friend. She sobers up, my other friend sobers up. So I'm ready now, to get them out of there. And I'm like, okay, cool. We ended up leaving out of the club. Now, I told y'all this is a predominantly Latino and Hispanic community that the club was in. And so my friends, they're from really small, like predominantly white towns. Okay. Yes, they're black, by the way. So they're very naive. So I'm like looking at them. We like wanting to ride the scooters. I see graffiti. The moment I see graffiti, I said, all right, come on. Let's go now. So the spirit is still like staying with me. He not letting up. He's staying with me literally wherever we go. We roll the scooters down. He's right there. He's on it. And so out of nowhere, this Latino man, he pulls up in the car with like maybe 4 of the people. It's a woman driving. And he said, hey, what are y'all doing over here? Mind you, I was ready to go anyway, but I got to look out for these 2 dum-dums. So I'm like, I can't leave my friends. You know what I'm saying? So he said, what are y'all doing over here? And he was just like, it's not safe. It's not safe, mommy. It's not safe. You cannot be over here. So I said, that's all I needed to hear. I said, let's go. Let's go. I just, after that, the spirit pretty much, I guess he felt confident enough to go. Because once we got in that Uber, that man drove off. Like he had already driven off, but it's almost like he circled around. We got in our Uber and we get back to our hotel. But when I say that spirit was not letting up, he said, nah, not today. It's not going to happen tonight.
This whole story sounds pretty rough for them. That man just walking right past the security like he did not even exist is already a huge red flag. Then he's staring her down and talking to her without his lips moving. That is some tough stuff to deal with while you're simply hoping to look after your friends. He was there, but he really was not. A voice telling you exactly where to go to save your friend from a bad situation is overwhelming, I guess. I'm just sitting here, considering how he stayed with them until they finally got back to the hotel safely.
What would you do if you were a little kid staying at your grandmother's house overnight in New Mexico and then hear something outside calling you in a voice that you trusted? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about a woman who said that her Navajo grandmother spent years warning her about the things that lurked outside after dark, and then one night she figured out why. When I was little, my grandma lived out in New Mexico. Her house sat by itself with a long dirt road leading up to it and open land in every direction. During the day, it was beautiful. It had red dirt and dry grass and a big sky and juniper trees. And at night, it felt different. At night, it felt like the land was listening. My grandma was Navajo, and from the time I was old enough to sleep over there by myself, she had rules. You do not whistle after dark, and you do not answer voices outside at night, and you do not go near the tree line once the sun is gone. And if you hear something calling for you from outside, you come get her first. She never said those rules in a joking way. She said them like she was handing me something heavy and expecting me to carry it right. When I was 8, I stayed with her for a week during the summer. I remember one night, especially because it had been hot all day and the house was still holding the heat after sunset. My grandmother had all the windows cracked and one box fan going in the hallway. I was sleeping in the little back room with the quilt too heavy for summer, and before bed she came in, shut the curtain tight, and told me again not to look outside if I heard anything walking around. I asked her what would be walking around. She said something old. Then she turned the lamp off and left. I fell asleep for a while, but then I woke up because I heard somebody outside my window. At first it sounded like slow steps in the dirt, soft and dragging a little. Then it stopped right under the window. I was wide awake after that. I remember laying there staring at the dark ceiling and listening so hard. I kept waiting to hear my grandma's footsteps in the house or the fan in the hall or something normal enough to drown it out. Instead, I heard my mother's voice outside the window, soft at first, but saying my name. My mother was not there. She was back in town more than an hour away. I knew that even as a kid. I knew exactly where she was. That was part of what made my whole body go cold so fast. I pulled the quilt up to my chin and stayed still. Then the voice said my name again, but sweeter this time, telling me to come outside, telling me she needed help. I started crying without meaning to, quiet at first because I didn't want whatever was outside to hear me. And then the thing laughed. It had been using my mother's voice until then, and that laugh was something else. It dropped low in the middle of it and turned into this rough, ugly sound that made every hair on my arms lift. After that, it stopped trying to sound exactly like her. The next time it spoke, the voice still had pieces of my mother in it, though it sounded stretched and spoiled somehow, like it had listened to her a long time and still hadn't gotten it right. It said, "Come here." I squeezed my eyes shut, and then I heard something brush against the side of the house. Slow, like a hand dragging over the wood. I should not have looked. I know that. My grandmother told me not to. I was a kid and scared, and my brain still wanted to make sense of it, so I slid out of bed and went to the window anyway. The curtain was thick, and I only pulled it back a little. But there was something standing out there. Tall and way too close to the house. At first, all I could make out was a shape. Thin shoulders, long arms hanging down, and head bent slightly like it was listening for movement inside. And then the clouds shifted enough for moonlight to hit it. Its face looked almost human for 1 second. And then I saw the mouth. It was too long and split too wide at the corners, and it was wet around the chin. The eyes caught the moon and flashed pale, then black. And the skin looked like it had been pulled tight over a face it did not belong to. It lifted one hand and crooked one finger towards the window, and then it smiled. I screamed so hard, and my grandma was in that room almost instantly. She did not ask me what happened first. She grabbed me, pulled me away from the window, and pushed me behind her. Then she said something I didn't understand back then and still won't repeat now because of the way she said it. Firm and angry, like she was speaking to something she had every reason to hate. Whatever was outside moved. I could hear it circling the house again after that. Quick steps in the dirt, and then stopping, and then another stretch of movement. Once it scraped along the wall near the kitchen, and once it made that same broken version of my mother's voice right outside the back door, asking to be let in. My grandma never opened anything, and she stood there with one hand behind her keeping me back and the other lifted slightly, speaking low and steady towards the dark. And at one point the thing outside let out a sound I still hear in my head sometimes. It wasn't a growl exactly, it sounded closer to a person choking while they laughed. And then it went quiet. We stayed awake until sunrise, and my grandma did not let me out of her sight once. The next morning, she took me outside with her only after the sun had been up a while. She showed me the dirt beneath my window, and there were prints there. I had not seen tracks shaped like that before. They looked almost human in places and then stretched too long at the front. The heel dug deep, and the toes were narrow and sharp. Around them, the dirt looked churned up like whatever had stood there had shifted its weight over and over while it waited. Then she showed me the wall. 4 long marks in the wood under the window. Not deep enough to tear through it, but just enough to tell me it had been feeling around for a way in. I asked my grandma what it was, and she looked out towards the trees when I asked, not at me. Then she said, "Something that heard you breathing." I never slept in that back room again, and years later, after my grandma died, my family sold the house. I went back once before it changed owners and stood in the yard where that window had been. The scratches were still there under the paint. I was already walking back to the car when I heard it. Very soft, from the tree line. My mother's voice, saying my name the same way it had that night, and I did not turn around.
Those scratches on the wall under the window are what stand out the most. I mean, it was out there in the dark, just dragging its fingers along the wood, trying to find a way into the house. I cannot even think about that messed up version of her mom's voice without feeling a jolt. It was not just a trick. It was like something was wearing a voice that did not fit right. The description of its mouth being too long and wet around the chin is just gross. It's like it was hungry. The thought of that tall, pale shape standing in the moonlight seems quite intense.
What would you do if your dog started refusing to go into one room, losing weight, and then your child lets you know that there's a little boy in the corner that keeps checking inside him? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about someone who said that their family dog saw something before anyone else did. It started with the dog. That's why I listened faster than I probably would have otherwise. We had an old lab mix named Murphy who was gentle and lazy and obsessed with food. He wasn't the kind of dog who got nervous over nothing. So when he suddenly stopped going into the den, I noticed. At first, he'd just hover at the doorway and refuse to step over the threshold. Then after a few days, he stopped even doing that. He'd stand in the hall and stare into the room with his ears pinned back and this low sound in his throat that I had never heard from him before. I figured maybe there was a mouse in the wall or something electrical buzzing in there, or even maybe some smell we couldn't pick up on. But then he started losing weight, fast. The vet checked him and ran blood work and told us they didn't see anything obvious. And we changed his food. We watched him more closely. He ate and he drank, but he still kept dropping weight. Around the same time, my 6-year-old started saying there was a little boy in the den. That room was mostly shelves and a recliner and one ugly lamp I kept meaning to get rid of. My kid liked to color in there while I folded laundry nearby, so the first time they said, "The boy in the corner wants Murphy to come closer," I honestly thought it was pretend play. I said, "What boy?" And they pointed to the far corner by the lamp and said, "That one." There was nothing there. I laughed it off, and then my kid said, "He doesn't like when you laugh." That made me stop. I asked what he looked like, and they said, "He's skinny. He keeps counting." I did not ask more that day. A couple nights later, Murphy finally went into the den on his own. Only he didn't go far. He crept in maybe 2 steps and then froze. Just stood there staring into that same corner while every hair along his back lifted. My kid was sitting on the floor with crayons and looked up at him and said, real casual, "He's checking your ribs again." I grabbed my child so fast, it scared both of us. And that night, Murphy slept pressed against our bedroom door instead of at the foot of the bed. After that, things moved quick. Murphy started waking up growling at the den door. We'd hear his claws scrape on the hardwood around 2 or 3 in the morning and find him in the hallway, staring into the dark room like he was waiting for something to come out. Then I started hearing whispering in there. Soft, a child's voice maybe. I never caught full words, just enough sound to know I wasn't imagining a house settling. My husband still thought there had to have been some normal answer, mice or the vents. Our kid watching something creepy online and scaring himself. Whatever helped him sleep. Then one evening our child came into the kitchen and said, "He says Murphy is hollowing out." I remember the exact way those words hit me. I asked who said that. And they said, "The boy, he sits inside him and counts." That same night, Murphy threw up in the hallway outside the den. There was blood in it, and at the emergency vet, they found nothing they could explain well enough to match how bad he looked. He stayed overnight, and we brought him home with medicine and the instructions, and of course, no real answer. He lived 2 more days. On the last night, I woke up because I heard Murphy making this awful sound from down the hall. Not barking, more like choking around a growl. I ran to the den and stopped in the doorway. Murphy was inside the room. Finally all the way in. He was crouched low to the floor with his eyes fixed on the corner. And in that corner, I saw him. A little boy. Thin arms, bare feet, and dark hair hanging over his forehead. And he was crouched with his head bent like he was studying something on the ground. Then he looked up at me. His smile was too wide for a child's face, and without taking his eyes off me, he said, 32. Murphy collapsed, and my husband got there right after me. By the time he hit the light switch, the corner was empty. Murphy was still breathing then, but barely. He died in the car before we made it back to the emergency vet, and we buried him 2 days later. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't, because after Murphy was gone, my child stopped going near the den entirely. I asked why, and they said, "He's mad there's nothing left to count." We moved out within 3 months. I know how that sounds. We moved because of one room, a dead dog, and a story about a little boy in the corner. Fine, that's what it sounds like. I also know what my child said while we were packing the last box. They looked into the empty den and said, "He says that you would have been next, Mommy."
Hearing that kid casually mention the boy was counting ribs is awful. I do not know how many parents could possibly sit there calmly after hearing that. It is those small, specific parts that feel the most honest coming from a child. They do not have the imagination to make up something as specific as hollowing out a pet. And then that final line about the mom being next simply finishes it. I would have left everything behind and never looked back. There is nothing scarier than a kid telling you about a threat you cannot even see. I've got shivers only picturing that empty room.
Queen Mary holds the title for the most haunted ship in the world, and once you understand its history, there's no wonder why. Among a plethora of deaths like Walter Anderson in Haunted Room B340, and the explanation behind the sounds of crushing metal and men screaming because of a tragic collision during World War II, there's a lot more to get into. Another reported haunting on the ship was traced back to an 18-year-old named John Petter, who was fatally crushed by a watertight door during a routine safety drill. The drill was scheduled for 3:55 a.m. John, who had only been a crew member for a few months, attempted to slide through a door just as it was closing, but he didn't quite make it in time. He was found by a fellow crew member with his body still pinned between the door and the frame. This happened, of course, at door number 13, which is now considered another very haunted area of the Queen Mary. A few years after John died, a night watchman reported that he had been walking toward door 13 when his German Shepherd became frightened, like he had seen something that wasn't there, or that he at least couldn't see. The guard then heard a clanging metal sound moving toward him, which scared both him and his dog so much that they ran off. Over the years, others have also claimed to have been chased off from the area, as well as reports of a metallic sound, like the phantom noise of door number 13 being slammed shut. And one woman reportedly saw a man near door number 13, who she was later able to identify via old photographs as none other than John Petter. Another major paranormal hotspot on the Queen Mary is the first-class swimming pool. Not only can splashing be heard when nobody is in there, but wet footprints have also appeared out of nowhere, leading away from the pool, which is incredibly spooky when you consider that the pool was drained of water. The ghost of a young girl named Jackie is specifically known to hang out in this area. Some believe that Jackie may have drowned in the pool, although there's no documented proof of that. Even though it can't really be proven, children's laughter can still be heard echoing through the pool, and the photos are definitely hard to explain.
Come on, Mama!
There is something very off with the Great Wolf Lodge. The baby in that video began crying immediately after walking into their room at the Great Wolf Lodge, and people in the comments were saying that that little girl is not just feeling something off about this place, but she must be seeing something that they can't see. And this is all the more believable if you've heard that story about the family of 4 staying at the Great Wolf Lodge. The premise of the story is that these parents and their 2 children had booked 2 rooms, one for him and his wife with a queen bed in it, and then a bunk room for the the children that had an adjoining door, meaning that a door in the parents' room connected them to the room right next door with the bunk beds where the children would sleep. Well, they went off and enjoyed their day at the water park and came back to their rooms to sleep after a very eventful day. But around midnight, their 6-year-old son burst through the door to the parents' side of the room, crying and terrified. The dad thought that maybe he had just had a nightmare, but then the little boy said that he had seen something in his room. So the dad gets up to go check the exterior doors to both rooms to make sure he had locked them, and he had. So at this point, he just starts to think, okay, my little one's imagination must be running a little wild, and he let his son sleep in their bed with them for the rest of the night. But then at 3 a.m., the mom wakes up and is frantically looking around, which then wakes her husband up. When the husband asks her what's wrong, she says, "You didn't hear someone just scream, Mom?" The dad gets up out of bed again to go check on the other child, who is still in the adjoined room. But instead of being in bed, he finds her huddled up in the corner of the room, hyperventilating. And the daughter basically described seeing the same exact figure that her brother had seen. So at this point, the dad is now freaking out. He's running around, turning all of the lights on, checking under the beds, in the closets, looking for some sort of explanation for what now both of his children have seen. The mom is asking her daughter more questions about what she had seen, and she's giving her the details, saying that she was so scared that she crawled across the floor and hid in the corner of the room, trying to stay as quiet as humanly possible. But as the daughter is telling the story, the mom says, "If you were trying to stay as quiet as possible, why were you screaming out for me?" And the daughter says that she wasn't the one calling out for her mom. So they're all freaked out by this point. The dad decides that he's going to stay up until daylight just to keep an eye on everything while his family tries to get some rest. Well, once everyone had fallen back asleep, he starts to hear a loud banging noise coming from the other side of the adjoining door. Obviously, he's absolutely terrified, right? But he decides, you know what? I have to protect my family. So he gets up to go see what is banging on this door. And when he opens it up, he notices that the lights in the bunk room are still on, there's nobody inside, and his children are safe and sound with his wife in their bedroom. But then he starts to hear his wife panicking in her sleep, so he starts trying to wake her up. When she does wake up, she tells him that she was having a terrifying nightmare where she had woken up in the same exact bed in the same room they were in at that moment, but she had gotten out of the bed to use the bathroom. When she opened the door to leave the bathroom, she was suddenly stuck inside of the room with the bunk beds, and this evil entity was trying to get her. So in her dream, she runs over to the door that connects the bunk room to their bedroom and starts banging on it, hoping that her husband will open it to let her inside. She said she's banging on this door with all of her might, but then her husband woke her up. The family, understandably, packed all of their stuff the next morning and left, despite having a few more days of their vacation planned.
The idea of a door banging in a dream while the husband hears it for real is so bizarre. Seems like sleep and reality started bleeding together in that hotel room. That poor mom probably thought she was just asleep, but her husband was out there watching the door shake. Then there's the pool on that ship, wet footprints appearing when there's no water around is a nasty touch, honestly. It is as if something is still trying to go for a swim, even though the pool has been empty for years. I would have a hard time even closing my eyes where the air feels very heavy.
Here's story time. In the last part, I told y'all about how back when I was pregnant, I started having these really bad nightmares about this demonic creature that would perch up on the house and try to steal my unborn baby. So here's what happened after that. Like I said, we all stayed in this big trailer park, and then one day, this new younger couple moves in to the left of me that we'll call Jose and Casey. Now, Casey was very friendly and would talk to us, but Jose wouldn't. He would give us dirty looks and keep driving, but I didn't blame him because we're strangers. Months later, me and Miss May and my husband are standing out the yard talking when Casey walks over and she looks distraught. She asked me if we can sit down and talk alone, and I said, sure. She said, I think I'm losing my mind. I said, why? She said, I'm 6 months pregnant, and I started having nightmares about these scary looking things trying to take my baby. I literally said, oh hell, here we go again. So I called Miss May over. She keeps hearing someone knock at the doors and windows, scratching on her roof, and something growling and scratching underneath her bed. She also said that she was just standing beside her bed folding clothes when she felt something reach out from underneath the bed and grab her leg and squeeze really tight, and that was why she ran outside to us. And when she pulled up her pants leg, there was a big red mark right where she said it grabbed her. Miss May said, you need to cleanse that house. I'm going to give you some stuff to ward it off and do not throw it away. Miss May goes home and then comes back with a big basket full of stuff and shows her how to use it. So she put those coins and gemstones on Casey's doorsteps, and just like she did for me, Miss May makes up these little bags full of herbs from her own garden, and she puts them under Casey's pillow and around the house to help stop the nightmares. And she rubbed some kind of oil all over Casey's belly real deep and made it very clear, do not throw this stuff away. You're going to need it until you have the baby. For the next few days, Casey comes out feeling great, said she hadn't heard no noises, she wasn't scared, and she hadn't felt this good in months. So I'm outside working in my flower bed when her husband comes home, and he walks up the doorsteps and says, what is this shit? And starts kicking the coins off the doorsteps. And he's raising hell with Casey about it. And I thought, why does that bother him so much? It's not like the coins are all over the doorsteps. They're in a pretty little bowl. So a few days later, I'm outside and Casey asked me, hey, will you come over for a few minutes? And she was acting kind of weird. And I said, are you okay? She said, I just haven't been getting much sleep. Like, it just won't stop. I don't know if it's in my head or if it's really happening. I can't tell anymore. I said, you need to go to Miss May and tell her. She said, no, I don't want to involve her in it. My husband does not like her and he made me get rid of all that stuff. I said, you threw away Miss May's stuff. She made that to help you. That's probably why this thing's messing with you now. I said, if you talk to a doctor about depression, she said, no, my husband would never allow it and he won't let me tell a doctor what's going on. I said, well, you need to go talk to someone. Either way, whether it's medical or spiritual, you need help. And she said, no, my husband will freak out. I said, well, what's more important, pleasing your husband or protecting your baby? She said, I know, I got to do something. Is Miss May home? I said, yeah. When she tells Miss May her husband threw away her stuff, Miss May said, look, something's up with your husband. I don't know what, and the way he's reacting to this stuff, it scares me. Just be careful. Casey said that evening, Jose came in extremely angry, found all the bags and threw them away, and she don't know how he knew where they were. Casey's husband goes over to Miss May's house and he starts a war. He tells Miss May, don't you come back over, don't talk to my wife, leave her alone, you're crazy. Miss May said, I was only trying to help her. She came to me. He said, well, I don't care, don't go back to my house, don't have nothing to do with my family, you stay away from us. And Miss May said, fine, you ain't got to tell me twice, fuck off. And of course I was going to have Miss May's back always. I don't care what was going on, I love her. So that kind of put a strain on mine and Casey's relationship because she couldn't be around Miss May, therefore she couldn't really be around me. But we do keep trying to check on her. After her husband leaves to go to work, we'd go over there and knock on the door and make sure she was okay, and sometimes she'd open the door, sometimes she wouldn't. When she was around 7 months pregnant, she's sitting down on the doorsteps just bawling her eyes out crying. Her old man gets in the truck and leaves, and I walk over there and ask her if she's okay, and she said no. And then she pulls out these ultrasound pictures, and they were all crumpled up. I'm peeling these papers apart. I said, why did you ball up your ultrasound pictures? She said, I didn't, my husband did. We just had a big fight because I showed him the ultrasound picture and told him there's something wrong with the baby. That ain't right. And he said, I need to stop making stuff up. He said it was a camera glare, and then he balled the pictures up and left. And I was trying to calm her down. I said, well, maybe the computer threw a weird image. You know, sometimes stuff like that does happen, even with ultrasounds. But once I unwatered the pictures and looked at it, I immediately knew something was wrong here. You know how sometimes the baby will face the camera while they're doing an ultrasound, so you're looking directly at the baby? That's what this one did, but behind the baby's face was a whole other face, also looking at the camera, and it didn't look right. The doctor did a double take and rechecked and made sure there was no twins, no triplets. It was only one baby in there. The second face behind the actual baby's face looked like something out of a horror movie. It scared the hell out of me. This thing was peeking up at the camera with these wonky shaped eyes and mouth, like two heads put in one with a third lump here. It was so weird looking. She said, I told him, I dream about this demon every night. It's after our baby. It's gonna take him. I said, well, if you truly believe that, let's go get some help. Let's talk to Miss May. Let's talk to a doctor. She said, no. I said, please. She said, no. If Jose finds out she was over here or I even talked to her, he will flip the hell out. No, we cannot involve her in this. I said, look, that woman saved my baby's life. I'm telling you, if this is some type of evil spirit or demon, she'll know what to do. Let's go get her. I called over Miss May and said, you need to come see this. Like, I don't know what is in this picture or what's going on, but you need to see it. And when Miss May looked at them ultrasound pictures, she put her hands on Casey's belly and said, that's not good. Casey said, what? She said, it's in there. You need to get rid of it. Casey said, I'm not getting rid of my baby. Miss May said, no, not your baby. The thing that's in there with it. You've got something inside your belly drawing off your baby, and it's going to unalive it if you don't get rid of it. And then a car went by at the end of the road, and I think she thought it was her husband coming home, so she got scared and said, no, I'm just being crazy. Y'all forget it. And then she went home. That evening, we're barbecuing outside when Jose comes out and starts a fight with me and Miss May. He calls Miss May crazy, and then we all get into it. I said, don't you call Miss May crazy. That woman saved me and my baby's life. You can think what you want, and you don't have to listen to her, but you're not going to stand here and disrespect her either, not in front of me. So around 8.5 months pregnant, ambulances come up there and got her 4 or 5 times. She's been rushed to the hospital for bleeding. The doctors did a lot of testing. They even sent her to Chapel Hill. She did overnight stays. They tried everything and they could not figure out what was stressing the baby out. And because they can't pinpoint what's causing this, they put Casey on bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. No schmegs, no arguing, no stress, no house chores, nothing. She has to stay in the bed constantly. Would you believe that Jose still demanded schmegs from her even though she was on bed rest and put their baby at risk and would get mad and start big fights if she didn't do it? He caused his mom to come stay with her. Now his mother was a sweetheart. She was a Latino woman, very sweet and kind, always cooking, and she took great care of Casey. She would come over and talk to us. You could tell that she loved Casey and that baby to pieces. You could also tell she was terrified of her own son, Jose. She said she thought there was some type of evil being or demon destroying her family. After moving in, she got a feeling that there was a bad presence there, and she would see shadows move throughout the house and hear scratching on the roof and under the bed. One day she was praying over Casey and the baby when Jose walked in, and he grabbed her and physically removed her from the room and threw her back in the spare bedroom, like aggressively. She didn't want to be kicked out of her grandchild's life, so she backed down. He wouldn't even let her bring her little like Christian charms like crosses or Mother Mary necklaces, none of that in the house. When Casey turns 9 months pregnant, about 3 o'clock in the morning, we hear an ambulance go rushing out from their house, and they're taking Casey to the hospital. 4 days later, they come home empty-handed. They had lost their little baby boy, and all I could think about was what Miss May said about this thing being inside her belly with her baby, draining it dry.
Casey showed that red mark on her leg when something grabbed her from under the bed, and it is fairly wild. I mean, it was no bad dream if it left a physical bruise. Then she looks at the ultrasound and sees another face behind her baby. That is not right on so many levels. The doctor checked for twins and found nothing. It looked like a monster, but it is going on inside her. I mean, Jose throwing away May's stuff was a bad move. He saw his wife in pain and he did not care. Why would he do that? It makes me wonder if he really knew what was happening.
I don't know why, to be honest with you. This isn't talked about more. Rosalind McGinnis lived in Oklahoma with her mom, her stepdad, and her brothers. And Rosalind McGinnis was only 12 years old and in the 6th grade when she walked out of her middle school for the very last time. Growing up, she was always a very happy child. She loved animals, loved music, loved hanging out with friends and meeting new people. Overall, such a wonderful little girl to have around. Yet, things for her changed when she was around 9 years old when her mom met a man called Henry Piet. Henry Piet would be the man that would become Rosalind's stepfather, and Henry was a terrible, terrible man. When they met, Henry also had children of his own, so they kind of bonded over that. They had a lot in common as far as the stage of life they were in. So Rosalind's mother and Henry begin dating. It gets serious. They end up merging their families, leaving Rosalind not only with a new stepfather, but also with step-siblings. And Henry's red flags started showing immediately. He entered Rosalind's life when she was only 9 years old, and only 3 years later, she would disappear. He wasn't a good guy in any capacity, and when they all started living together, he very quickly became demanding, controlling, and very, very angry. And it wasn't long before his anger turned physical, and he would take out his anger on both Rosalind and her mother. And it was bad, bad. Bad to the point that people around them would constantly notice them having injuries or bruises all over their bodies. There are conflicting reports as far as how he treated his own children. Some reports state that he was also awful to them, but some say that he wasn't. Whatever the case is, at the end of the day, they were also children, and the environment that Henry was creating was extremely toxic and violent, which no kid should be in. There are also kind of a little bit of conflicting reports when it comes to Rosalind's mother. If you are familiar with this case and know it through and through, please feel free to comment if I missed anything, but she was also absolutely a victim of Henry herself. However, in later interviews, Rosalind speaking now as an adult, she has said that her mother knew that Henry had essayed Rosalind and that she didn't care. She once also did not believe Rosalind when she was little, and she went to her and told her that one of Henry's sons had essayed her. Her mom didn't believe her. So to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure what that dynamic was like. Although later on we do see that Rosalind's mother did try to escape to get away from Henry and tried to take the kids with her. So I don't know exactly what to make of that, but just thought I should mention it. But because Henry had such a bad temper and he was so noticeably evil, people around them began to notice the way that he was treating Rosalind and her mother. And concerns about their safety were raised very quickly. So what did he do? Well, he just packed up his family and he moved them to a different city without any plan at all. So they were kind of in limbo for a little while, just trying to get money to settle into a new house until they did eventually move into a house in Wagner, Oklahoma. And there, Henry only got worse. The punishments that he would carry out were not only physical, but now also psychological. He was horrible in every sense of the word. There was one time in which Gayla, that's Rosalind's mother, managed to escape Henry. She took all of the children, she fled to Missouri, but he quickly found them and he dragged them all back to Oklahoma. And as you can imagine, for attempting to escape, things only got worse. On a different occasion, CPS stepped in to separate them, sending Gayla, Rosalind, and the children to go stay at a shelter to get them away from Henry. Yet even after that, Henry managed to find a way to get them back because that's what he always did, because he had such a strong need for control. He craved control. When Rosalind was 11 years old, Henry had his 15-year-old son perform a marriage ceremony between him and Rosalind. Obviously, it wasn't a real marriage ceremony. It was held in the back of a van, but his son acted as both the priest and the witness, and yeah, he married them. If that gives you an idea of how sick and twisted Henry's mind was. January 31st of 1997 was a Friday. According to reports, Rosalind's mother, by that point, had had enough. Enough was enough. She had officially left Henry after less than a year of marriage, and she had moved into a women's women's shelter for victims along with the children. But that day, while Rosalind was in school, Henry showed up. He called her over and told her that he was going to be reuniting their family, and he told her to go back into the school and to wait for a sign. That afternoon, Henry sent his son, who was around 18 years old at the time, to pick up Rosalind from school in a small gray pickup truck. Rosalind obviously knew who he was, so she got in the car willingly, and the son then drove her to a hotel room in Tulsa, about 2 hours away. At first, Rosalind was told that her mom was on the way and that she was going to be joining them. But once they got out of town, once they met up with Henry then told Rosalind that that was not going to happen. He told her that her mother didn't want her and that she was now going to be considered a runaway. He also told her that she would be in very serious trouble if she ever did try to leave and go back home to be with her mother. And then he turned to his own children and informed them that 12-year-old Rosalind was now their new mother. Meanwhile, back at the shelter, Gayla has realized that her daughter is missing. As soon as Rosalind failed to show up from school at the time in which she would have already been back, Gayla called the police to report that her daughter had been kidnapped. She knew that it was Henry, or at the very least, she had a very strong gut feeling because she knew what he was like and she knew that he was the type of person to kidnap a little girl. Gayla was going to try and do whatever she could to find her daughter. She would print out posters with her name and her face on them. She would talk about it as often as she could to make sure that people were aware. She would work with authorities and also then turn to the internet to spread awareness, begging and pleading for her daughter's safe return home. But for her and for authorities, it felt like Henry and Rosalind had completely disappeared off the face of the earth. And after about a year, the search slowed down. Rosalind would be held against her will for the next 19 years, and throughout that time, not by choice, she would give birth to 9 babies, all fathered by Henry. It was more than clear that Henry wanted complete and absolute control over Rosalind, and he wanted to treat her as if she was his wife and ultimately as the mother of his children, all for his own sick pleasure. At only 12 years old, Rosalind's days were filled with absolute torment. In the first few days, Henry put Rosalind in a van in which they would be living out of for about a year. They traveled throughout different cities and states in the United States, staying in hotels, ranches, and trailer parks until they eventually decided to cross the border into Mexico in the year 2000. I said they didn't decide. It was all Henry's decisions. He was the only one making decisions. But in Mexico, they found practically an abandoned, empty building with a rotted out floor, no electricity, no water, no anything, and that's where they stayed. Rosalind would beg on the streets for food and money just to have enough to barely survive, because any money that they did have, Henry would use on buying substances. And I guess Henry's tactic to staying under the radar included 3 things. He first changed his own name and Rosalind's name very often, not legally obviously, but he would just start calling her and calling himself different names in an attempt to stay hidden. He also managed to get a hold of different vehicles so they would stay undetected. Henry also wanted authorities to actually truly believe that Rosalind was a runaway and that she had left on her own accord. So every so often, he would drive her back to Oklahoma in his van to have her write letters to mail to her mom, pretending that she had left on her own and that she was doing okay. He drove back to Oklahoma to mail the letters out from there to try and make them believe that she was still in the state. Henry also then forced Rosalind to dye her hair black and to wear glasses to make her unrecognizable. 12-year-old Rosalind McGinnis experienced SA from her stepfather every single day for years. She was not even 13 years old when she fell pregnant for the first time. She lost that baby, but it was still an extremely traumatic situation for her, given that she was a baby herself. This is a quote from her, quote, "I was scared and I was so confused and I didn't know what was happening. Looking back on what happened to me, I don't even know how any human can do that to a child, what he did to me." At 14 years old, she fell pregnant again, and she was only 15 years old when she gave birth for the very first time. Henry delivered the baby himself in the back of the van after he had taken Rosalind to the hospital and had been told that it was way too early to deliver the baby because they were not ready yet. But like I said, he had such a strong need for control that he wanted the baby out, so he took the baby out. And just the thought of the pain that Rosalind would have been in that traumatizing experience, it is truly incomprehensible. But the SA wasn't the only kind of was put through. Henry still had the same sick and twisted and violent mind that he had always had, and daily he would find a way to punish Rosalind for anything. Rosalind had scars, still has scars all over her head, from her head to her toes, from what he put her through. A lot of those scars being from glass bottles, wood pieces, baseball bats, or cast iron skillets. In the beginning, Rosalind has said that she tried to escape multiple times, that all she wanted to do was run away and cry, but she was not successful, and then she would be punished even worse for it. It got to a point in which Rosalind felt like she had no more to give. To be able to cope, she had to disassociate to protect her mind, and she kind of just became numb until all of the things that were being done to her, everything that was happening to her, stopped registering, because this was her new normal. Quote, "When I was caught, the consequences were great. Eventually, at one point in time, it didn't affect me anymore because I was so used to it," unquote. Fighting back took all of her energy, and she was running out of it. By 2016, 19 years after she had been kidnapped and 9 births later, Rosalind and Henry Henry had landed in Oaxaca in southern Mexico. It was there that Rosalind, who was going by the fake name of Stephanie at the time, met Lisa and Ian at a local supermarket. They were an older married couple who would ultimately be the ones to finally help her escape. One day in early 2016, Rosalind took her children to stock up on groceries at the Oaxaca supermarket. When she went to go check out, she realized that she did not have enough money. Lisa and Ian just so happened to be behind her, and they just so happened to speak English, luckily. They offered to help Lisa pay for her groceries, and then they struck up a conversation. From that very first time meeting, something immediately felt off to Lisa and Ian. Lisa said, quote, "We were in line and they were in front of us. They had two giant cars of groceries. One was entirely filled with meat, which the children told us later was only for him," referring to Henry, "and they couldn't pay the bill. They were short on money, so Ian and I just gave them money and she was grateful," end quote. After that day, Lisa and Ian decided to stay in contact with Rosalind, and they would continue seeing each other at the supermarket every once in a while. And almost every single time, all of the kids were barefoot. Little things like that were so extremely concerning to Lisa. In regards to the kids, she has said, quote, "They were just desperate to talk, not the very youngest ones because they wouldn't say anything until they got to know us, but they just wanted anyone to talk to because it wasn't something that they were allowed to do," end quote. Eventually, things got to the point in which Lisa and Ian befriended not only Rosalind and the kids, but also Henry. I think they were playing it smart. I think they knew that something was off and they were being nice because they genuinely wanted to be nice and friendly towards Rosalind, but also in order to gain trust. And one day, they went over to Rosalind and Henry's house and they were absolutely shocked to see the conditions they were living in. The children's sleeping arrangements were absolutely concerning. Quote, "There were 3 stalls, for lack of a better word, all in line with a raw cement floor, and they had holes in the walls for doors and windows, but no doors and windows," end quote. But it was when Henry slipped up that everything changed. Because during a visit, Henry accidentally said that he was 62 years old. Lisa, who knew that Rosalind was 32 years old at the time and had a teenage son, started doing the math. If she was 32 years old and she had a teenage son, that meant that she had a baby when she was a teenager herself, and this man was 62 years old. Something was very, very wrong. As soon as she could be sure that Henry wasn't listening, Lisa went up to Rosalind and she said, "What's going on? I know something is going on. Please let me help you." Together, they then started talking about how she would ultimately escape. A few weeks later, when Henry was passed out, Rosalind took the only opportunity that she knew that she would have, very quietly packed up the things that she had, and with cash that she had been saving up, she called a taxi to take them to Lisa and Ian's home, and she fled with 8 of 9 of her children. Her oldest child had managed to escape because of Henry. He couldn't take it anymore and he just escaped, but they would be reunited later. They made it safely to their house, and after a few days, Rosalind finally told Lisa everything. She told her real name. She told her that Henry was not her husband, but instead her stepfather, that all of her kids were his, and that he had kidnapped her 19 years ago. Lisa looked up Rosalind's real name, and the first thing that came up was the missing persons poster. And Rosalind broke down and she started crying and telling Lisa that she had waited almost 2 decades for somebody to find her, to notice her, and help her. In July of 2016, Rosalind McGinnis walked into a U.S. consulate with 8 of her children, told them everything, and finally, after 19 years, she began the process of returning home. Her oldest son was reunited with her shortly after, and they were finally safe. As they started working to make their way back to the United States to start the very difficult process of rebuilding their lives from the ground up, the FBI launched a full investigation into Henry Piet's whereabouts. He managed to be on the run for over a year until September 2017 when he made a critical mistake. Guy wasn't very smart and attempted to obtain a U.S. passport at the American Embassy in Mexico City. He was arrested on the spot, and on February 25th of 2020, nearly 24 years after the kidnapping, Henry Piet was sentenced to life in prison. He denied everything, by the way, saying that he didn't do anything wrong because Rosalind was his wife and all he was doing was spending time with his wife. He was saying that he was deeply in love with her and stuff. Weird. As far as Rosalind's mom, all I could find was that Rosalind was eventually reunited with her mother, but there's nothing specifically mentioning her mom and their reunion. But there are a lot of interviews that Rosalind has since then done, and she says that obviously she's traumatized from everything that she went through. It takes years to heal from something like that or to even try to begin healing. But she has spoken out and said that they are now focused on replacing all of the bad memories with good memories. Yeah. Strong woman.
This poor girl had to go through that for 19 years. Fake wedding ceremony in the back of a van was rather cruel. He even made his own son act as a priest, which makes him sound even more evil. He wanted total control over her life. He basically got it until she met that couple at the grocery store. The children did not even have shoes on when they saw them there. I mean, that tiny fact changed everything for her family. Most people would just keep walking. They actually cared enough to help, though. It is a miracle she ever made it out of there with all those children.
Weird spooky story time. And after reading this, I'm realizing this is some quantum immortality stuff happening. Where would I even begin? I have daily experiences. I am, what my daughters say, a psychic medium. I just say I have gifts, many gifts, and it's bizarre. Though living near Pacheco Pass has been quite interesting. Oh, here is but one you may like. Well, two, actually. I live in Ridgemark, which is a little past Hollister South on 25. I know some people who live in Ridgemark. Beautiful gated community, by the way. I had to drive into town and do a little bit of shopping at Target. It was a summer day a couple of years ago. There are two lights you go through before you get to Ridgemark, one being Union Road. I was driving back home and had my daughter on speakerphone. We were jabbing our jaws about this and that, nothing significant. I was getting closer to Union when my daughter's tone changed. She became more agitated. As this was happening, my phone started to cut in and out. I couldn't understand what she was saying. Then my tone matched hers. I ended up hanging up the phone because I was irritated. At this point, I was coming up to Union Road. There was a small chain-linked fence area to the right. There was a house just before the fenced area and a house just past it. There is also a store down below, Bertuccio's Market. I don't know if I spelled that right. I'm going to spell it here. Then Union Road. I could see that the light for me was green, and it stays green for a while, so I was good to go. I was at the beginning of the fenced area when I found myself driving in slow motion through Union and a red light. I looked up at the light, then to my right. I saw a car coming straight at me. At that exact moment, it was like time sped up to normal time, and I was flying through the rest of the intersection. I felt like I was somewhere else, and then I came back into this reality. I didn't see anything. It was like it happened in a flash. Why do I feel like this is turning into a quantum immortality story? Because after I realized I ran a red light and experienced time speeding up, I had a feeling of being electrified. Oh my god, this is totally a quantum immortality experience. Have you heard of quantum immortality? Because this is exactly what people say happens. Almost a high feeling, not drugs, rather a floating sensation. I went home and was nearly manic telling my husband and youngest daughter what had just taken place. They both listened and didn't judge. I'm so glad that they didn't judge you because I have heard so many stories like this. This is like totally quantum immortality. And if you've ever had another experience like this, please let me know because there are people out there who have continuous quantum immortality experiences. Oh my gosh, it does happen again. Okay, I'm making a part two. Go to part two to hear the next time this happens to her. Part two of the woman who lives in Hollister, California that's been experiencing quantum immortality and I don't think she realizes it. So in part one, she's telling me this experience and I'm like, girl, you're experiencing quantum immortality almost like she jumped timelines. Then I'm like, oh my god, maybe this happens to you more than once. And then her sinu continues and it says, that is until a couple of years later. I had to take my youngest daughter to Wesley, California to meet up with her dad. It was a winter day with heavy fog. Getting to Wesley from here means driving over Pacheco Pass. I have driven that road many times before, during rain, storms with rain and hail, snow advisory, and of course, the dang wind. I've driven Pacheco Pass dozens and dozens of times, so I know exactly what you mean. I had never driven it while foggy. As we started up the mountain on 156, it was a complete whiteout. You could not see the hills going up or the mountains on either side. I believe I white-knuckled the steering wheel doing about 20 miles per hour. I was following a car in front of me who thankfully had their hazards on. I remember being so thankful when we had made it to Dinosaur Point. Then you start to descend down the mountain, still in a whiteout, doing 20 to 25, not being able to see 5 feet in front of the car. I know the turns and straightaways that pass San Luis Reservoir. There is a spot at the top of the road where 3 pyramid-shaped hills sit. That is the place where I know there is one more turn down that hill, and you are out the pass. You made it. I only saw a glimpse of the first hill, then the fog thickened. It was almost like being in clam chowder. The next thing I knew, I was driving straight. The fog had lifted a bit, though it was still pretty thick. I could now see that the road next to us on the right. There is a turn off to take a service road when you come down the hill. I saw that road and was extremely confused. I looked over at my daughter. She was sitting there quiet and staring out the front window. I was looking around and was seriously tripping out. I didn't know where we were or how we got there. I thought maybe I got lost and took a wrong turn, though there is no wrong turn to take. All I saw was road, a few cars, and fog. I didn't want to say anything to my daughter, not wanting her to freak out like I was, so I kept quiet. Until I saw the sign that says Los Baños 11. I then said out loud, not thinking clearly, how did we end up here? My daughter heard me whispering this to myself. She asked me where we were. I told her. I didn't know how we got there. Then she told me she was in a daze and didn't know either. Oh my gosh, this is quantum immortality. I asked her if she saw me going through the last part of the reservoir and the 3 hills and the huge turn you have to take. She said she didn't remember. We were both just as baffled as each other. That Los Baños sign is quite a ways from the bottom of the hill, and you hit I-5 pretty fast, so we lost all that time. My question is, did we go through a wormhole? What the heck was it? And has anyone else experienced such an event? Because of these anomalies, I refuse to drive Pacheco if there is fog at night, and I'm always uneasy driving down 25 near Union Road. I have had many more events happen to me on Pacheco. Wild stuff. Seeing lights in trees, lights in the sky, mists, a huge blue wave, weird animals, ghosts. Oh, and a strange event where I drove past the same spot 4 times in a row. I hope you find this sort of stuff in interest, what I have shared. If you need more details, please let me know. Heck yeah, this stuff is interesting. Okay, now the Pacheco Pass one has me on 2 theories. So 1, you're experiencing quantum immortality because clearly you've experienced it before. And then 2, the wormhole thing is something so many people have experienced, even myself, where I'm like, how the heck did I get here? I've driven this road dozens and dozens of times. I used to drive Pacheco Pass 4 times a week for God, maybe 5 or 6 years, because I would also meet my daughter's dad in Los Baños because he lives in Fresno. So either you experience one of those Pacheco Pass wormholes or you are having multiple quantum immortality experiences.
I'm never driving through Pacheco Pass after this. How she described that without fog was already bad enough. But walking up miles away near Los Banos without knowing how she got there is another level of strange. She said it was like being in calm chowder and then suddenly the whole scene shifted. I would be totally frozen if my daughter and I both just lost a chunk of time like this. And that car coming at her at the light before everything sped up back to normal, that feels like something straight out of a glitch in the Matrix. I'm honestly surprised she ever gets behind the wheels. And that's it for today. If you liked this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and maybe comment down below which story was your favorite. You can click on this next video, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.